tariffs hitting Canada aren't a glitch. They're a signal. Because the problem right now isn't that all of you have unrealistic plans. It's that the environment has shifted faster than our assumptions have. Over the past several months, tariff policy has come roaring back, not as a last resort, but as a first move. And I apologize for any Americans in the room, but you are going to become the bad guy in the speech. Not just against our rivals, but against the US's allies, including Canada. And this isn't about headline drama. I'm not here to unpack what's behind the headlines. It's about operating risk, cross-border inputs that now carry hidden costs. And of course, many of you, I don't need to remind you on this. Equipment is getting flagged, rerouted, and delayed, not because of failure, but because of new logic. And the longer we treat it like it's a temporary hiccup, something that'll just go away if we just ignore it long enough, the more we'll fall behind systems that are already adapting. Now, I know that's a lot to open with. I could have started with Canada is at a crossroads, and at least 5 of you would have opened your email right away. You're not at a crossroads, you're at customs, and half your package just got flagged for secondary screening. So let's talk about what shift actually demands from a competitiveness and innovation lens. Because telecom is no longer just a line item in national plans. It's a precondition. These tariffs matter, and not just because of what's listed. They matter because of what they represent. A shift in how the US approaches trade with Canada and with the world. Trade has become a tool of coercion. You want access? Make a concession. You want predictability? Stay useful. And it doesn't stop with goods on a list. Telecom gear may not have been targeted directly, but try explaining that to your logistics team when your hardware gets rerouted mid-shipment, when you have to start purchasing entirely different fleet vehicles, and your equipment costs have gone through the roof because they go through Indiana instead of coming directly from Asia. This isn't accidental. It's the new operating logic. Everything is leverageable. Everything is conditional. This isn't a fair fight. It's a bit like David and Goliath. But it's not a hopeless one. The advantage goes to those who see and use the leverage and build around it, not just react to it. So if you're already still thinking of trade exposure as someone else's job, we're behind. So how did we end up here? Not by accident. We ended up here by design. Canada's economic model, telecom included, was built around integration. We didn't need to build full stack capacity at home. We got access by being predictable, compliant, and quietly useful. That model worked when the system was rules-based. But now the rules are tactical, and the players are armed with knives. That logic doesn't hold anymore. We've optimized for convenience, not insulation. We trusted proximity to mean protection. And now we're running critical systems through pipelines we don't control, through rules we didn't set, exposed to risks that we didn't plan for. That's not a procurement problem. That's building the main road to your factory through someone else's backyard. So let me get to the point then. Telecom is not a consumer service. It's not a commodity layer. It's not some line item in some national strategy that took 6 months for the government to plan. It's national infrastructure, full stop. It underpins everything. Digital systems for energy systems, and emergency responses, AI infrastructure, public services, defense communications, every single smart city and clean tech deployment that you read about on the news. But here's what's changed. Infrastructure is no longer neutral. It's a pressure point. It's a bargaining chip. It's where states are testing each other's vulnerabilities, the US testing Canada, Canada testing China, so on and so forth, through regulations, through tariffs, through outright coercion. And if your sector is still treating itself like a service industry in that environment, it's going to get left behind or squeezed out. The world is treating telecom like a battlefield. Huawei bans, Nokia and Ericsson subsidies, so on and so forth. And the least we can do is stop acting like we're in customer support. And so we talk about global volatility, and yes, it's real. But the bottlenecks hitting telecom builds in Canada aren't all foreign. They're here too. There's site approvals that take 18 months. There are municipal veto points with no escalation paths. There's spectrum releases scheduled like their annual general meetings for some random club. It's intergovernmental coordination that dies in email. And in a geopolitically stable world, fine, that's just inefficiency. That's just delay. But in this world, it's national vulnerability. Because even if you have the capital, even if you have the supply chain, even if you have the will to build, you still have to run through the gauntlet. And that's where too many of these national plans stall. It's why we aren't able to just build, baby, build. So here's good news. There's momentum to work with. The Carney government is signaling a turn, not just in dollars, but in delivery. Infrastructure, not just announcements. That includes housing, energy, transit, digital systems. But unless you speak up, telecom isn't going to show up on that list. And we can't let that happen. Because there is no national grid, there's no resilient AI rollout, there's no public service digitization without the networks that everyone in this room plans, builds, and operates. That means we need to speak clearly, not just about ambition, but about constraint. We need to show where timelines are breaking down, where coordination is failing, where delivery is getting blocked. Not to complain, but to compel. Because if telecom infrastructure is going to anchor national goals, then it needs to be treated as national infrastructure, not left to navigate tariff exposure, permitting chaos, and interjurisdictional blind spots alone. The burden of proof isn't on you guys as telecom to demonstrate value. It's on government to remove what's getting in their way. And let's be honest, resilience as a word is starting to lose its meaning. I'm sure you've all seen the word resilience a trillion times over the past half year. It shows up in slide decks, press releases, keynote speeches from random guys up on stage at forums. But too often, it's treated like a feeling. It's something you kind of support. You say, yeah, resilience, woo! Not something that you're designing for. But real resilience isn't coming from optimism. It comes from making different bets on systems that can reroute, on partners that can hold under pressure, on infrastructure that doesn't break the first time politics gets noisy. That's not disaster planning. It's how serious institutions are thinking ahead. And it's what's separating the players, the companies, and the countries that are staying on the field from the ones that are waiting for conditions to improve. So what does that mean tactically? You guys don't set trade policy. You don't set tariff rates. You're not negotiating the digital chapters in the next USMCA agreement. But here's what you do control: how you source, how you build resilience into your design, not repairing it after the fact, how you show up as a coordinated sector and speaking with one voice and not just a fragmented set of suppliers, each scrambling for your own personal interests. And most of all, it's how you use this moment here. Because right now, telecom has the opportunity to reposition itself, not as a line item to be managed, but as infrastructure to be empowered. This is a decade-defining moment. We can't control what the US does, but we can control what we build in response. The model worked when the system was rules-based, but now that the rules are tactical, and I've already said that, we can build infrastructure with buffers and institutions that don't flinch. We can build a telecom sector that doesn't just execute national priorities, but shapes them. So let me end on a concept that I think more of us should borrow. From political economist Mark Zachary Taylor. He calls it creative insecurity. It's the idea that national progress and innovation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from pressure, from the recognition that survival and success are not guaranteed, that you have to earn every single scrap. Countries innovate when they feel exposed, when the stakes are real, when the alternative to action is decline or worse. And that's where we are now. We're not in a moment of crisis, but in a moment of productive pressure. One where telecom can either be an afterthought or the anchor. So if we want to build for real, under pressure, at scale, with purpose, then we need to treat telecom as infrastructure, not overhead. That's what the moment demands. So let's get to work. Thank you.
Lawrence, have a seat. We can have a couple of conversations or a couple of questions and a conversation. So we're essentially facing a technological blood sport. As Clausewitz was...
You said it, not me.
Yeah, war is just another form of politics. But in this case, tariff wars are just another form of politics.
Yeah, so I mean, if you can kind of think about it historically, we used to bludgeon each other with sticks and stones, and then we bludgeoned each other with swords and guns, and now we're bludgeoning each other with tariff policy, but the end result is the same. Who controls and who wins?
Right. And, back when I got into this business 20-odd years ago as a product development director, I would have never thought that I'd be thinking about geopolitical technopolicy as an aspect of what I was trying to plan out for network services and network connectivity.
Yeah, no, so anyone doing imports or exports now is now a part-time foreign policy analyst, so welcome to the team.
Welcome to the team. Well put. And so given, we've just got a few more minutes, but given the nature of the audience and the random guy talking in a forum, so to speak, what's the the essence in terms of what they should be thinking on a day-to-day basis, on a tactical level, that's going to be able to satisfy a strategic goal. Because in many ways, many of the companies that are involved in the MEF and the representatives here today are going to be reacting to these forces as opposed to proactive in shaping these forces.
So look, I mean, I'm not here to tell you how to do your jobs. You know better than I do. But what I can say is, if you're purchasing something, you now actually have to pay attention to where it's coming from. It's not just about buying from the cheapest possible source. Now you have to consider the geopolitical risk. Is this something that could blow up in your face 6 months from now, a year from now? Where is this coming from? Is it being built in, say, Vietnam, and then being routed through the United States into Canada? And if so, then all of a sudden, Vietnam-US trade relations are your problem. That's not the world that most of us are familiar with, but it's the world that we're living in now.
Yeah, and there's a fine distinction here. It's not just hardware, it's also services, because there are a number of different countries. For example, Canada put a tariff on the purchase of internet services within a couple of provinces, and then Trump reacted to that, and then everybody stepped back to how can we put it, the status quo ante status.
Yeah, so I mean, I am very strongly against putting tariffs on services. It's sort of market distortionary, and it's not really protecting jobs in the same way that you might think of in terms of product or physical good tariffs. And so I think that's sort of a general dumb idea, and I wouldn't necessarily want everyone to go down that route. So I don't even want to mention it. It's the tariffs that shall not be named.
The tariffs, okay. Well, given that, then, there's still the direction as to whether you're a policy analyst or a commercial strategist inside a company. How do you buffet? You're falling into a state of uncertainty because you're not really certain how to be able to plan against it. You have to react to it. So everyone falls into the category of an uncertainty economy, right?
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, how many people in this room feel 100% certain about what's going to happen in the next 6 months to a year from trade policy? To be honest, I don't think the President of the United States, who's setting these things, knows.
Yeah, or if he decides he changes his mind. That's the prerogative of the presidency, I guess. And why don't you give the audience just a brief overview in terms of your policy institute and how it fits into being an affiliate of ITIF, which is a well-known technology think tank in Washington, D.C.
Sure. So I run the Center for Canadian Innovation and Competitiveness, and so we being myself, conduct research, policy research, primarily for government, but as well as for folks like yourselves who are interested in how we can make Canada more productive, more innovative, and more competitive. And so these are kinds of things that I think broadly affect everyone in the world, and particularly in Canada. And we're at a moment in time where Canada's often facing these kinds of productivity crises. And we say, well, we can't really know what's going on. But so my aim is to get to the bottom of what is going on. And that reflects broadly in the work that our affiliate organization in the United States, ITIF, which is the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, really cuts their teeth on as well. Excellent.
And the ITIF is funded by private donors, but also a number of different corporate donors that are well known.
Yeah, so think telecom companies, tech companies, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so you're admitting to being one of us.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions for Lawrence? Wow.
I guess I was comprehensive.
Okay. Well, Susan, I'll give you 5 minutes. Oh, go ahead. You've got a question. Don't be bashful.
Sure. James Morgan Twilio. I'm usually a heckler, so sorry. American, obviously, but you mentioned the digital services component, and I think your prime minister said something like America is now trying to monetize our hegemony, which a fair statement. But I'm curious if we could double click for a second on the digital services piece, because I think most of the people in this room exist in a world of ones and zeros and free information passing between networks, which is how a lot of us create value. how would you speak to building resiliency, if that's the way we want to talk about it, or optionality in supply chain in a world where we've historically had a free flow of information occurring between global networks, and certainly significantly so, maybe more highly so than maybe anywhere else in between US and Canada in the last 80 years?
So the way I see it is there are instances in which the US government may want to pressure its own domestic firms to, say, monetize the hegemony and to push forward. And I think broadly, when we're talking about scale here, right? And so Canada and the EU are oftentimes kind of in the last couple months exploring, well, what would it mean if we built our own digital services, if we had our own version of cloud services? Who needs Google, Amazon, Microsoft? We could build our own. And so these things operate on an immense scale, and we're talking billions, if not trillions of dollars of investment. And for every single person in that room, that means likely, oh, you have to retire 2 years later so we can have a Canadian cloud service. And so, what is the cost benefit here? And if we're talking about just sort of, oh, it'd be nice to have, sure. If it's a matter of national security, that's a different matter. But I haven't seen any indication yet that it's something that's a matter of national security. And so on the monetization of digital services, you may recall that Canada recently introduced and then repealed a digital services tax. And so what I would call that is kind of a carbon tax on using digital services. And it's ultimately punitive to Canadian companies and to Canadian consumers. And so the government is saying, look, let's try and collect some money from Facebook, from collecting ads and Amazon and so on and so forth. But the end result is essentially it makes it more expensive for businesses like yourself to run ads on Facebook, on Google, and on Amazon. And it's passed on. Google is not saying, all right, well, I'll just take the hit. I'll just pay it, and you guys pay the same price, because these things are largely inelastic. So if you're going to purchase ads on Facebook, you're not really looking in a newspaper anymore as an alternative. So if the price goes up by $2, you eat it. You're not saying, oh, well, let me shop around. Where else can I purchase a digital ad? Because it's hitting all across the board. So if we want to resolve this issue, and largely it's an issue relating to sort of global taxation, there's a process going on at the OECD. It's called BEPS, and it's ongoing. And I would say to anyone in this room, if you're ever talking to anyone about it, urge Canada continued in that process.
Excellent. Perfect timing. We just wrapped up. Lawrence, thanks for your vision and the words today, and hang around. He'll be here for the whole day. So thank you.
Thanks very much.